Today I will be reading an essay I wrote in English. I want you to see it more than just an essay, but there's a lesson. Even though this advisory lunch is mandatory, I want to thank you all for being here and listening to me speak today. For the speech, I ask that you open yourself up and be able to lean in and learn something from this. I first want you to think of your parents and grandparents and ask yourself, what side of themselves do they show you? What side do they not always reveal to you? And who were they before you were born? To do this, we must go back. I don't have the book with me, but The Big Smoke is a poetry collection written by Adrian Mateka. Set in the post-slavery Jim Crow era, the poems are primarily narrated in multiple layers by former heavyweight world champion boxer Jack Johnson. The poem's narrative voice constantly shifts between Johnson, white America, and his three partners, Bell Schreiber, Etta Durea, and Hattie McClay. Through his different voices, Mateka constructs not just a boxer, but an artwork of American identity, masculinity, and racial tension. Johnson's voice tells stories of the violent and cruel nature of his boxing career, stories where victory rarely came without humiliation. From being forced into unpaid fights orchestrated solely for the entertainment of corrupt law enforcement, to winning legitimate boxing matches against white men who saw him as a racial threat, Johnson's career was an uphill battle against both his opponents and society. Reading this epic poem has been uncertain, though deeply rewarding. I've never had to read an entire book in one weekend. Yet within that rush, I found comfort. There's so many echoes of my grandparents' old sayings and mannerisms scattered throughout Johnson's swaggering voice. In just the first few pages, I noticed the way he talked smack to his opponents, or boasts about himself, saying things like, "I could jump 5 feet backward from flat feet," or "my fists work like cranked up engines." His bravado is more than just pride or arrogance, but it is strategy. He explains his method, saying that talking inside the ring is key to winning a fight because it mentally baits opponents into attacking senselessly. My grandfather would often drop little gems of wisdom like this, though wrapped in stories that seemed almost too big to believe. He would tell me about carrying a couch on his shoulder to help my mom move into her dorm, or wrestling a gator to save a friend. As a kid, I would roll my eyes at these tall tales. I never really understood the depth of my grandfather, or the history behind his need to tell such stories. I only knew the version of him that age had softened, the one who laughed easily and spoke gently. As I've grown older, I've had many conversations with my mom and my grandma about him. And what I find fascinating is how both of them speak with equal parts pain and admiration. They suffered from his temper and his pride, but they also seem mesmerized by his confidence. It makes me wonder if this is what Mateka wanted readers to feel about Johnson, a kind of uneasy respect. My grandfather, like Johnson, had this defiant way of shaping his own legend. Perhaps it was a survival tool, a way of reclaiming power in a world that constantly tried to take it away. Positive self-talk, as we call it today, is extraordinary. I would argue that it's likely what gives you the courage to wrestle a gator, or to stand your ground when the world tells you to shrink. Reading The Big Smoke reminded me that sometimes pride is not arrogance, but it is armor. Still, this poem resists me at times, especially when Mateka describes how Johnson abused his female partners. Mateka includes multiple interviews in which the sheriff and other officers interrogate these women, asking chillingly repetitive questions like, "When was the first time he hit you?" And "Were you ever scared for your life?" These moments made me uncomfortable, even angry. It is difficult to reconcile the myth of Johnson the trailblazer with Johnson the abuser. I understand that this poem lives in a historical context where violence against women was both normalized and often hidden. But even with that understanding, it is jarring. The complexity of these interviews made me feel discomforted to realize that strength and cruelty can absolutely exist within the same person. That realization makes Johnson seem human and not heroic. I believe that this is Mateka's point. He does not want us to worship Johnson. He wants us to see the contradictions that history often smooths over. The parts of the poem narrated by Johnson lovers are especially striking. Through their letters, they communicate their jealousy, trauma, and moments of reluctant solidarity. Sometimes they threaten each other, other times they console one another. But my point is that each of these women witness a different version of Jack Johnson, the charming gift giver, the violent manipulator, the fragile man behind the legend. This duality mirrors his boxing career. The same charm and charisma that wins him fans also allows him to dominate and hurt the people closest to him. Inside the ring, he's graceful and disciplined, but he's also the target of unrelenting hatred. Outside the ring, his control falters. And I find this contrast both fascinating and disturbing. It raises questions about power, how it corrupts, how it seduces, and how sometimes the oppressed can become oppressors in their own private worlds. It also makes me wonder why the women stayed. Was it love, financial security, fear, or just the societal expectations that women, especially during that time, had nowhere else to go? There's no clear answer, and maybe that is why these sections linger with me. They challenge me to confront the moral discomfort of admiring someone who is also deeply flawed. Perhaps this discomfort is a part of the reading experience. Let me say that again. Perhaps this discomfort is part of the reading experience. Perhaps Mateka does not want the reader's empathy to be easy. He wants it to feel earned, conflicted, and real. At its core, The Big Smoke explores how far Jack Johnson was willing to go to get what he wanted most: recognition, freedom, and respect. Watching him endure so many humiliations, fighting unfair matches, facing police brutality, being reduced to a cartoon by white audiences, made me ask myself, to what extent would I fight back if I was him? There's a haunting scene where Johnson has to lie to reporters about the results of a fight against the white man, pretended humility, and sugarcoating his victory so he wouldn't be targeted for his success, or worse. It is heartbreaking to see a man forced to downplay his own greatness just to survive. Yet, there's also something remarkable about the way he maintains his composure and confidence despite the pressure. His victories, though diminished by racism, still shine. They stand as proof of what it means to persevere in a world that refuses to acknowledge your worth. In the beginning of this speech, I asked you, what side do your parents and grandparents show you? What side do they not always reveal? And who were they before you were born? I want to tell you that regardless of what side they show you, or what you see most, they are only people. People suck, and they are flawed. And this will not change. Despite this flaw, one of the most heroic things they have done in their lives is care for you. From the moment you arrived in this world, they've tried to A, keep you alive, and B, do their best to push and mold you into a functioning human being. They may not have always been fair or morally correct, but you must understand that there is no parenting manual. They tried their best. And they certainly kept you alive because you're still here and listening to me. I'd argue that raising a child is selfless and heroic, and should be considered a victory. Reading The Big Smoke has made me think deeply about Johnson and the unspoken strength it took to live in America as a black man in this time. Despite all the corruption in his industry, he managed to stay alive and succeed in boxing. Similar to Johnson's, my grandfather's victories were not always easy, clean, or moral, or even safe, but they were real. He was not perfect. He was surviving. And this is how I believe he'd like to be remembered. Thank you.